So in my experience in reading my report, what I found is that there, astoundingly, traumatically, there were several, or I wouldn't say several, multitude of statements made in the report that were not supported by the documentation. Even when the documentation was provided by her. And we had two separate experts evaluate the evaluation. And in the Texas Administrative Code, which the Texas Board of Psychologists use a lot, it's important to verify the veracity of statements by the parties, so you know what the truth is.
Right.
And even in my own field, when somebody's telling me something of whom I'm evaluating, one of the questions I always ask myself is, why are they saying this to me at this time?
Yeah.
You know, what's the motivation
What's
for
the motivation?
saying
Yeah.
And in the Family Code, under Chapter 107, the verification process is very important. And they all explicitly say that. Although the statements in the report were contrary to the documentation that was submitted.
There's a disconnect.
There was a big disconnect. A big disconnect.
Yeah.
So if there's no basis,
Yeah.
okay, and you have contrary documentation, there's no basis, then how can the opinions be valid?
Could that almost be considered, in a sense, like maybe not perjury, but something along those lines?
Well,
I mean, because basically what's coming down to, and if it's done with intent.
So going back to the issue of being a professional, if you're a competent professional and you're adequately scrutinizing your own work because you realize that this is going to be in a hearing, and if it's incorrect, you can get discredited. You can lose your reputation and integrity. But yet there's a multitude of these types of errors, so to speak. You have to wonder, was this because there's some kind of impairment? Was this because there was some intent? You know, what is this? But what is being stated is not supported by any facts.
Yeah.
So there's the basis is easily questioned, and so
Right.
then the opinions are easily questioned.
Yeah.
So, you know, going back, she was involved in our case by an agreed order and started probably January of 2021. And it took a fairly long time for her to come to some completion, I think until September. And then we received notification that she was near completion. She just had to have one final interview and with each party, and then she would complete it. And in order to complete the report, she wanted the balance due, you know, which was paid, but she also wanted the retainer for testimony. And that wasn't part of the fee agreement. Part of the fee agreement was that whoever desired her testimony
would pay for it.
Would pay for the retainer, the trial retainer.
Yeah.
And any remaining funds would be returned.
Yeah.
So to get the ball rolling, to move forward, before we even got into report, but mind you, getting the report was not contingent upon that. I mean, balance was paid, report was done, the report should have been released.
Right. And she was almost like extorting more money out of you by withholding the report.
Yeah, contrary to the fee agreement, contrary to the orders.
Yeah.
She was holding the report until the retainer was paid.
Yeah.
Which wasn't part of the fee agreement.
It's very unethical.
Was not part of the orders.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in order to keep the ball rolling and not get into some unnecessary back and forth, again, that's when I was represented, and that would have been a waste of, you know, attorney fees for Mom and me. I just paid the retainer. You know, then we got the report. Another interesting thing about the report, and in discovery, which I discovered, was that she usually released the report on the possession day of the parent that she talked negatively about.
Oh, how convenient that would be.
And she expressed concern, but apparently she advertises she's been in this field for 14 years, and it would be reasonable that she's very familiar with the possession times.
Yes.
It would be reasonable to say, okay, well, if you're concerned about the impact of the parent in getting this report and recommendations while they're with the child, that you then wouldn't release it on that day.
Right. You put it out ahead of time to prevent.
You would put it out ahead of
Yeah.
time while they're with the other parent.
Yeah.
That would be the reasonable thing to do.
Yeah.
So that is a thing that comes into question, I
Yeah.
think, play. What is the motivation for doing that?
Yeah.